Welcome to What is Next? What is Next is a very educative program on GTV, the authentic and trusted voice of Ghana. What is Next is a program that is just asking questions about contemporary challenges confronting us as a people. But in the process, we look for people we consider to be people with accumulated wisdom. And we get closer to them and ask them to help us find some relevant answers to such questions. Now, this afternoon, we are just blessed to have a lady who is the chairperson of the Public Services Commission, and she is here to help us reflect on the subject, the ethics we need for public service in Ghana at the moment. And I'm happy to introduce to you Dr. Janet Fofie, Ampadu Fofie. Auntie Jane, you are welcome to What is Next.
Thank you very much, Reverend. Let me express my gratitude to you and to GBC for giving me this opportunity to come and shoot a little breeze with you in terms of some of the things that affect us in the public services. I'm grateful, and I hope, I'm not sure I have that much wisdom, but I hope I can share a few thoughts, some of the things that have engaged me, particularly as I assume to this position. So I'm grateful to be here. Thank you very much.
We're also grateful. Now, just help my viewers to know a little bit of you. We know you are Janet Ampadu Fofie, and you are the chairperson, Public Service Commission. But who is this lady we are talking about? A little bit of you.
Okay. Janet Ampadu Fofie Nijima. That was my maiden name. A little over the 60s. Grew up, was born and bred in Kumasi. Attended St. Monica Secondary School, 1 to 6. Very, very important formative years. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. But after sixth form, I left Ghana, went to the UK for a few years, trained as a nurse, got a degree in nursing, practiced for a minute, and then got married, left and went to Jamaica, and spent about 10 years in Jamaica raising a family. Then I went to the United States, continued with my tertiary education. 2004, following discussions with the family, I came back home. So when I came home, I joined the Public Services Commission as a commissioner. So for 13 years, I was a commissioner at the Public Services Commission. Very, very good grounding, very, very good understanding. Gave me a tremendous view into the public sector, the public services of Ghana. And then fortunately, was brought back as the chairman to the commission in 2018. And so, in a nutshell, that is who Janet Ampadu Fofie is.
You mentioned your school days, you mentioned Jamaica, you mentioned nursing in the US and other places. Are there some values that have, values that you don't want to let go, that have shaped your family life, professional life, values that you just can't let go?
Indeed, I think I mentioned the St. Monica's upbringing. For those of our viewers who might know, St. Monica's was started by the nuns, Anglican nuns. So it's an Anglican girls' school located in Mampong, Ashanti. Quite rural at that point, so we didn't have the opportunity to come into town. But what the nuns inculcated in us was hard work, simplicity. You couldn't come in. I remember when I first went, I had my hair braided, and the nun said, "No, we do not do that here. And so you need to focus on your studies. And that was the most important. That and the rearing. I'm not an Anglican, but I was made to attend the Anglican services, learn the Anglican tradition, and Christianity for me was deepened whilst I was at St. Monica's by the nuns. The nuns showed us that really the self was not as important as the we, the common good. Here we had British nuns who had left their countries to come to Ghana, to very, very rural parts of Ghana, but they were comfortable, they were happy to help the local people. And so I learned from them that indeed respect for your culture is important, but you need to be disciplined. You need to do the hard work indeed if you're to reap the gains. And I think that has stayed with me for most of my life.
Now, there are people who want to celebrate you, but you may also have one or two people who have mentored you, people that you will want to say thank you to on our platform. Are there one or two people that you want to just affirm, just to say thank you to?
Yes, I think I mentioned the nuns. One particular nun comes to mind. She was my house mistress, one Sister Barbara Maud. Unfortunately, she passed last year. And she really made us into who we were. It's not just me, but I think the people who were groomed under her. My mom, I cannot actually go past this. This was a woman who believed in Christ, gave her life to Christ, was not educated, hadn't attended school, but she saw the value of education. So all her kids, she made sure that even if she needed to sell her clothing to get us through schooling, that it was done. And there's no work that this woman didn't do, just to make sure that there was food on the table always, and there was clothing on our backs, and there was our school fees also got paid. That's not to say my father didn't do much, but I think if you really look at the two of them, my father will provide the funds, but the person who actually made these things happen was my mom. And she passed a few years ago, about 10, 12 years ago. And to date, I think she was one of the people who made me who I am. And incidentally, when I came back to Ghana, she's the reason why I came back to Ghana, because my father had passed. And when I came back after some 25, I'd been outside for about 28 years at that point, I felt like a stranger in my own country. And I vowed to myself that indeed this is not going to happen. When my mom passes, I have to be here. And to God's glory, I came back, and she was very happy that I had come back, very, very comfortable. At that point, she needed to go to the US every so often and decided I don't need to go back out there again. I think I've got my daughter home, and she made sure that indeed, if I entertain any ideas of wanting to go back, that was thrown out of the window, because she did whatever she needed to do to make sure that I understood the culture that I had come back to, that I understood the people, I understood what Ghanaians want and don't want, more importantly, and that I was able to stay and remain since 2004. Mm-hmm.
Viewers, this is What is Next on GTV, the authentic and trusted voice of Ghana. And I'm in conversation with Dr. Janet Ampadu Fofie, the chairperson of Public Services Commission, Ghana. Now, Auntie Jane, is there any significant relationship between matters of conduct and behavior and staff performance in the public service?
I will definitely say so, because in all systems, particularly in our Ghanaian public service system, conduct and behavior has always been regulated. And the reason is if people cannot behave properly as is expected, then the job in hand more than likely will not be done. And so where we find an organization that has good conduct, good behavior practices and cultures, we find that productivity tends to be on the higher side. Where there's indiscipline, where people do just what they want to do, where there are no systems, there's no culture, for the employees. Anybody does what they want, and the job and the mandate of the organization more than likely will suffer. So I definitely would agree that indeed behavior, good conduct is one of the key things to any successful organization anywhere, particularly in our environment.
And maybe help my viewers here. What are some specific ethical standards are expected from, say, public servants as you are raising the issues here?
I think the issue of ethics has been very, very important, and indeed, we may not fully know that in Ghana we've got a constitutional commission whose core function it is to make sure that we've got the guidelines, the necessary things in terms of ethics and conduct. SHRAJ, a constitutional commission, is mandated to ensure that as a society, as a public sector, the proper conduct is maintained. And so they, over the years, have come out with some areas for us to look at. When we talk about conduct, and indeed there's a code of conduct, a generic code of conduct that was developed by SHRAJ, and at the time it came out, all public organizations were entreated and actually mandated, not merely entreated, but mandated to pick that generic code and develop their own individual organizational codes. A number of organizations have done that. And so you'll find in the code of conduct, the generic code, for example, sets out and tells us who a public officer is. Who are we when we say you're a public officer? And I mean, it's coming out of the Constitution. So there are legal frames that tells us who a public officer is. What is the function of the public officer and what is expected of the public officer? Now, public officers, we are to note and know that indeed we're there to serve the public, period. We're not there to serve our own individual goals and aspirations, but rather we are there to serve. And I underline the word serve. Sometimes we forget. We're not there as masters. We're not there as bosses, but rather we're there as servants to the public interest. And again, if we are to serve the public interest, there's some things that we need to eschew and make sure we practice good conduct. And what are some of those things that we expect? Things like integrity. And we hear a lot about the term integrity. What does it mean? A public officer who doesn't have integrity, and it's not just a public officer, but when we look at society as a whole, a society that doesn't have men and women of integrity, I think you agree, Reverend, that it will be very, very difficult for that society to function and function well. We also, as part of the conduct that is expected, things like honesty, respect for the people you're supposed to be serving, respect for not just your bosses, but respect for each other. Because if you respect each other, then the way we treat each other and the way we work together will actually show it and manifest it. Now, other things like confidentiality are important for a public officer because, again, in today's world, I think you agree with me, all too often we see public items, things which really are confidential, being put out there in the public interest. A public officer has to be reminded at all times that indeed confidentiality, unless you have the authority to disclose some information that comes before you, unless you've been given the permission to actually put certain information into the public domain, you have no right whatsoever to actually engage anybody, not my brother, not my father, not my husband. Things which have been put before me as a result of the position that I'm holding. And so I think that's one of the areas that public officers, I think of today, I would stress, will need to go back. We all need to keep thinking about what it means in terms of our jobs, in terms of our functions, if we are to be trusted. Because trust and trustworthiness is also a very, very important criteria that we would expect of all our public officers. If we are not trusted as public servants, if we cannot be trusted to do the right thing at all times when nobody's watching, a good conduct is not only when my boss is watching and observing what I'm doing, but rather everywhere I am. Because guess what, Reverend? People know that I'm a member of the Public Services Commission. If I go outside of the commission and I misbehave, you see me doing all kinds of things which you wouldn't want to see as something that a public officer is doing, you find that the entire organization is going to be blackened. And that's not what we want to find from our public officers. So whether we're on the job, whether we're in church, whether we're at home, whether we're in the marketplace, we ought to distinguish ourselves as men and women who can be trusted, men and women who have been brought up properly, men and women who have good conduct, and who everybody can trust and be very, very happy with in terms of the work that is assigned to us.
Yeah. But you mentioned integrity, you mentioned honesty, good relationship, confidentiality, issue about trust. But do we just assume that public servants will demonstrate such high moral standards, or are there nurturing patterns, that will guarantee us such a high standard, ethical standard in public service in Ghana?
Thank you, Reverend. I think ethics as a whole, I'm not sure that you can teach ethics in the classroom. It's a doing thing.
We teach class.
You teach ethics in class, but unless people imbibe it and people do and act it, then I don't think we make too much progress. So, yes, ethics, I'm not sure even the public officer, we can give the codes, but it's something which is ongoing. And I think the leadership of any organization, any public service organization, will have to make a calculated effort to ensure that the ethics are actually being reinforced every day in everything that the public officer is doing. That indeed we are reminding ourselves, we're prompting each other to do the right thing, to act properly. Because if we do not do that, and we think that because we've got the codes, at one point we did a survey in the public sector, public services. Most public service organizations have codes, and yet the behaviors are very often not in accordance with the codes that we ourselves have developed and which we all have agreed are to guide us. And so I think we have to make a conscious effort to ensure that indeed, yes, the code books are there. We may have the rules, we may have the regulations, but it's the enforcement, it's the implementation of these codes which matter to me more than anything else. We can write nicely about these things, but if we do not practice them, if we do not live them, I don't think the impact that we expect will be felt. So in the public sector, and I think the work that Shraj has done, for example, clearly tells us that for organizations, every public service organization is to have an officer who is specifically assigned to this area, an ethics officer. And the function of the ethics officer is to come up with programs at derbers, at workshops, in any fashion that we can imagine, to make sure that indeed the ethics that have been pronounced in our codes are lived. We practice them. We started with these. In fact, every public service entity is supposed to have an ethics desk, because sometimes ethics, you might have a dilemma where you may not know, is this the right thing for me to do? Is this the right thing not to do? And so in the wisdom of Shraj and the people who put this together, we need to have an officer, but more important, we need to have a specific desk where employees who encounter ethical challenges or dilemmas can go in, not necessarily touting to everybody, but are able to go in and have someone listen to them and think through with them the right thing to do. Now, I'm not sure that we follow through. This was done maybe a few years back. We are supposed to be doing it, and I would encourage all public officers and all leaders who want to run ethical leaderships in their organizations, if they do not have one, to really go ahead and make sure that the ethics desks are there and an officer is actually designated for that. Why do we want a specific officer designated? Because if this person is designated, then we ensure that they're trained, they expose, they understand this whole area of ethics, if they're indeed going to be able to help the employees. And so training is important. Confidentiality becomes important also, because if it's somebody who's trustworthy and I go to them, I know that whatever I'm sharing will remain confidential and will not be found in the newspapers the next day, for example. And so I think the recommendation is every organization ought to have somebody who's responsible for the ethics and the behavioral side of their employees to help them make sure that the right things get done as much as possible.
You are the chairperson of the Public Services Commission. Are you worried about reports on unethical behavior in Ghana?
I think within the public services, yes, I am very concerned when it comes to our attention that there's some of these ethical behavior. But Reverend, I think it goes beyond the public services. I see it more of a societal challenge. Because after all, the public services, the public officers are members of our society. They're members of our churches. They're members of our homes. So, I mean, we cannot just point the finger at the public officer and say the public officer, and I hear a lot of that. The public officer is corrupt. Public officers are this, public officers are that. And it's a lot of concern. Anytime I get the opportunity, I say to my public officers, you know, this is the perception we have out there. Rightly or wrongly, that's the perception. It's our jobs to make sure that indeed we work very, very hard to make people understand that it's a mere perception. But if we do not work hard at it, and how do we work hard at it? An officer comes into your office. They need some service. You're supposed to do that with a smile. You're supposed to be providing a service. But all too often, we hear stories of, I call them our clients, because I think maybe if we call them anything else, then they might lose something. But if it's a client, we know the importance of clients in the public sector, in the private sector. And so if we call our customers, the people who are coming to us for service, our clients, and that's the term the Public Services Commission really, if you look through our manuals, we tend to call them not public, we call them our clients. They're the reason why we're here. And therefore, we need to be able to listen to them. We need to be courteous to them when they come to us. And when they come for services, we need to take time and explain. There are some things that we may not be able to do. And there's nothing saying that we have to do the impossible, but we have to take time and actually articulate and let people know. I'll share an example with you. The late K.B. Asante, renowned Ghanaian, renowned civil servant, very respected in the civil and public services. I was walking one day in my office and we were on the 5th floor. He was reaching his 80th birthday around that time. But he had climbed up the 5 floors, got to the 5th floor, and I'm not sure what he was looking, but he was just wondering. And so I came out of my office and I said, hello, sir, can I help you? Is there anything I can do for you? And he looked at me and said, you know, I've been wandering around for the last 30 minutes. I didn't do anything, but just the concern and the caring shown that indeed we are here for you. You are the reason why we are here. And I think if we all had that kind of attitude, and attitude is I think it's another topic we may come back and talk about the attitude.
You are the #1 person in public service in Ghana. You've raised issue about public trust. You have raised issue about service. And you are saying that, yes, there are reports about unethical behavior, but you wish they will remain perception. Look straight into this camera and talk to public servants in Ghana. Some of the issues you have raised, just emphasize them. And maybe talk, we don't know who is watching,
yes,
but talk to somebody who is watching us.
Thank you very much, Reverend. And indeed, I hope that our public officers get the opportunity to listen to me. Anytime I get the opportunity, I think I'm notorious, because I think as public officers, our #1 job is service. And I think if you don't think that's the reason why you're there, in my judgment, then you need to go find something else to do. It's a service. And I think it has to be service with a smile. Our public officers need to be open and receptive enough to the people who come to us for the various services. We hear of people going to, and I've gone to some of these public service entities, where I went to one place, I'm not going to mention the name of the organization, and the reception, the person who was at the reception, there was a screen, a TV screen, and they continued watching their TV screen, something or other. And when I said I needed to speak to XYZ, they said, oh, he's busy. Just sit and we'll let you know. And continue watching what they were watching.
I didn't tell them your profile.
No, I will not tell you my profile at that point. So I sat for a minute. And then I got up and again, without identifying who I was, just said, do you know you are the face of this organization? Assuming I didn't know anybody here or anything about what you do, what I'm seeing, that's what I'm walking away with. And so for all of us, all public officers need to remember that indeed, to the public, they know Public Services Commission. If they come and you do not give them the attention that they deserve, you do not listen to them, the words that you tell them, in essence, they are a nuisance. They can pick up on it, and that's what they're walking away with. And I think all public officers, it's a public service, people. It's a public service that we are offering. And if it's you're in there just because of maybe the money is good, then I think you have no business being there. We need to say, go find something else to do, and let the people who have that caring heart, the people who really want to make a difference, come and service the public of Ghana. Because they pay us. They are paymasters. And with their taxes, that's how we get paid. So if we do not have the patience for them when they come to ask sometimes what might seem like a stupid question, I say to my people, for me, there's nothing like a stupid question, because indeed, that's the person coming to you, that's what they're feeling, that's what they're thinking. And we need to listen to them. We need to be empathetic with what they're coming in with. Some people might be coming in asking you a question. You may gently have to redirect them to a place where they can get better answers and better responses. There's nothing wrong with that. And so I think as public officers, again, our attitude to the public will have to be at the utmost best at all times. Because if we don't, and we think it's about us, then I think we're missing it. It's not about us. It's about the people who are actually coming to us, asking for our help, asking for our assistance, asking for clarifications. There's nothing wrong if we do not have the answers, but we have no business being rude when we have the public come to us, wherever we find ourselves. It may be at the ports. We need to be patient. We need to be respectful of the people who come to us. And I think if we're not able to do that, then people are walking away, that they're afraid to come to us. They shouldn't be afraid to come to us. I think they ought to be comfortable coming to us, knowing that indeed they will get the needed help that they need.
Viewers, this is what is next. And I'm in conversation with Dr. Janet Ampadu Fofie. Now, she, just by grace, is the chairperson of the Public Services Commission, Ghana. And we are reflecting on ethics for public service. And on this platform, she is saying that Ghanaians should not be afraid of public servants. We should rather be comfortable getting closer to public servants. And therefore, Ghanaian public service individuals, bodies must see themselves as people who are providing service. They are servant. And I pray and hope whoever is watching us will pick some thought. She's saying that we need a caring heart, whether in the port, because you don't know who you are serving, and the person may go and may not want to come back. They carry bad impression about you and the organization. I know in some country like Uganda, they have directorates or ministries of ethics and integrity. In US, for instance, they have Office of Government Ethics. What would you recommend for Ghana just to improve our public, the body that you serve as its chairperson?
I think, in all honesty, I'm not sure we need to create new ministries. After all, we just went through a period where we were saying we have too many ministries. So I wouldn't recommend that we create additional ministries. If you look at the constitutional mandate of Shraj, it's there. Really, and I started by saying perhaps we don't need more laws. Yeah. We need tougher implementation measures and making sure, just monitoring and ensuring that indeed we're implementing effectively. I think if Shraj could be looked at, their scope and their mandate is so broad that rather than create a new ministry, but they do. The anti-corruption unit handles most of these things. So when you're talking about anti-corruption, conduct comes in, conflict of interest comes in, abuse of power comes in. So we just need to fund them at the levels in terms of not just cash, but making sure that we've got people with the competencies and skills to do the job that's expected. All too often in this country, I think we create some of these ministries and so on, and we just put people there. My organization deals with HR, so this is an area that I would strongly suggest. If you put square pegs in round holes, I don't think the work gets done very well. We need to make sure that Shraj has its share of funding as required, and Shraj has the quality and the competencies, competent experts who can actually help us. They've done a lot of work, and maybe some of our listeners may be aware of things like the conflict of interest guidelines that they put out a few years back. As I mentioned earlier, the generic code of conduct that was put out. The last major effort I know that they've worked on has been the NACAP, National Anti-Corruption Action Plan, which was an effort to move from just the laws and the rulemaking into implementation, putting specific, simple examples. And so for me, Shraj needs to continue on the implementation side, rather than have us create another ministry, which may or may not do the job. I believe let's use the existing structures that we have, empower them, give them the necessary support, funding and otherwise, and make sure and hold them accountable. Because if you're just going to be giving us the money without the accountability, then it doesn't work. But expect that indeed we do the faithful reporting and we actually monitor the funds that are being given to us to ensure that we are getting the job done. And I think if we do that, for example, this NACAP came up with the idea that in the area of behavior, we probably need to be looking at the entire society. And, I remember when we were younger, we had the Civic for Boys and Girls, for example, which attempted to tell us some of these things about ethics and what the right thing to do and the right thing not to do. I don't think we have them now. No. Can we go back to that?
Will you recommend that?
I would strongly recommend that, because if you listen to the media and what we are hearing of juveniles getting into all kinds of scrapes, something isn't working. We need to be able to catch these young people at a much younger age and bring them up right. So that when they get to the matured age, hopefully they'll know the distinctions between the right and the wrong, which is what ethics is about. Conduct which is acceptable, conduct which we all agree as a society is the right thing to do if indeed we are to make progress. But if we wait till they are the age where they start committing these atrocious infractions and crimes, then we may have left it too late. So I think going back to the entire society, the churches, and Reverend, you are from that fraternity, I think the churches probably also could help. The churches could maybe focus on that. We have workshops in our churches. We have people coming to teach. It would be nice to have at least a plan where 2-3 times a year we have ethics, because I'm sure the churches also do have their ethical issues within that fraternity. So, and you are catering to the souls of so many that indeed, I think if we had the churches also coming in, we want the schools to come in, and the schools we're talking about from basic education, I would say even from kindergarten. Because now the kindergarten people know sometimes more than what their parents know, because of social media and because of the internet and so on. So I think we need to look at every facet of the society, and somehow, if we all begin this conversation in earnest, and it's important, we cannot be placating ourselves and saying, yes, we've put out the quotes, yes, we put out we go to these seminars, but we don't ensure that indeed we're living it, then we may not get the results that we're looking for, I'm afraid.
Now, let's talk about gifts. The Ghanaian culture accept gifts given and receiving. You don't go to, say, traditional leaders empty-handed. It's expected. At what point should we be worried about gift giving and receiving of gift, especially in public service?
For me, the rule of thumb with gift is, can you really anticipate a situation where the person giving you the gift intends to get something in return? Gift, and I think Shraj has done again a lot of work in this area. There's a lot written, and indeed it's supposed to be codified. I'm not sure why we still don't have that bill yet, but there's supposed to be a bill which has been hanging for a few years now, which would probably try to make it a little clearer in terms of what's an acceptable gift, what is not acceptable. But my rule of thumb is, if I accept the gift, there's going to be some anticipation of something, a quid pro quo, something in return. For example, I do a lot of interviews of our senior officers. Somebody knows they're going to come before me in my panel to assess them for a position. The day before or before the exercise, you come to me and you say, oh, and indeed this has happened. We were out in the northern sector, and the exercise was to happen. We had traveled in from Accra. We got there at nightfall. And then an officer who was supposed to be one of the assessees come in and say, oh, we know you travel far and you're tired, but this one is small for you to, with a what? A thick blanket. So I said, what is this? You didn't get us here. We are here. So please, you go back. My advice to you would be, go back. We're not coming to ask you any difficult questions. We're just going to be asking you about the position that you want us to recommend you for. If you're ready for that position and you know what that position is about, you shouldn't worry. But if you haven't done that, rather than this, please go back to your home and quickly reflect on this position. Do I have what it takes to actually do this job that I'm asking them to give me? He went away, and indeed the next day when he appeared, he couldn't look up. And so I think in terms of gift, for me, this one was an example of somebody who clearly wanted to influence maybe the outcome of the exercise, even before the exercise had started. But would I, and again, you talk about traditions. I've gone to the northern sector where you go, you meet the chief, as you said, and before you leave, you're given some tubers of yam. I mean, maybe I went to pay a courtesy call to them because I was in the area, and they give you the traditional goat. If I say I'm not taking it, the implications in terms of our cultural understandings. And so would I risk to offend the traditional ruler by saying, no, gifts, Shrike says we shouldn't take gifts? I think, again, we have to be a bit more subtle than that. And I have learned something from my former boss, Professor Wood, who is incidentally one of the people I am eternally grateful for in terms of making me who I am and bringing me really up to speed. At the time he was my boss, sometimes, in fact, there were times he almost made me cry. And but he says in a can me binim, and I guess he must have done a good job. When he gets something like, even if it's a goat or something, he gets even the money way after the effect. His advice was, just go give it to maybe somebody needy. He takes it to a home. If he gets a goat or he gets a sheep, he carries it to Osu children's home. And so he would not offend the giver who may have been really interested in giving this out of the goodness and maybe to show their acknowledgement of something that they appreciate you did for them. But then it's not something personal. It's a self-interest when it comes to gift giving, which I think we need to watch out for. And as public officers, I think the gift comes, and sometimes here I would also want to say to the public, don't put them in the position, really. Don't put the public officers in the position.
Please, again, talk to the public, because gift giving and gift receiving is an issue in Ghana. And now you are talking about how the public should handle it. So we don't know who is watching us.
No, I believe the public
but
also...
You must also know that sometimes if you don't give the gift, the frustration, the delay. And so as you address the public, address that side also.
Yeah, but if you give because you want to jump the queue, if you give whatever it is, anticipating that you're going to get something in return, then it's illegal. In our system, and Straj has the guidelines and the rules, and indeed, if you're caught doing that, folks, public officers, if you're caught doing that, you might find yourself in trouble. If you receive the gift in anticipation of work to be done, you're going to be influenced. And the whole thing is for you not to be influenced, to be able to do your work as best as you can without being... So what happens to the people who cannot give?
And that is the issue. You go to hospital, you need attention. And you said you were at a place, somebody was watching television. The nurses are around, the doctors. If you are looking for your file in the ministries, if you be nice in the area of gift giving, within second they find you.
And that is wrong. I think again, and that's
but
why I'm saying...
this is what is happening in this country. You may know better than I do because of where you are.
I think I do not know better than you, but I think again, this is why I say it's a societal thing. We all need to work on this, because the person giving, in my mind anyway, is as guilty as the one receiving. If you don't give and you give them the work and they won't do it, we've got other avenues you can use to bring that to light. I get petitions all the time, some from the public, some from public officers who are not happy with some treatment that has been meted out to them. And so there are avenues. In fact, we went as far as, the Whistleblowing Act. We're not implementing it as much as some of us would have liked. But at least there's some areas where you can go make these reports. But if you want instant, and that's the challenge of today, instant gratification. We want Sakawa money, quick. We want to go to the ritualists and do these funny things because we want. No, you cannot gain where you haven't sown. I think you have to work hard. And as Ghanaians, if the officers are doing the work, truly sometimes they do have thick files to go through. Now, if you come in and you give me the money and I take yours from the bottom and work on it, as opposed to going systematically, if your boss is watching, you'll get into trouble. And so I would not do it. I would not encourage anybody. And sometimes it's the me again. What's in it for me as public officers? I started by saying, if you're in public service because of the money, then I think you have it all wrong. You probably need to go find something else to do. Because the money on this side, very often, it's not great. You have to have a real love for the work and a real love to help and serve people. And if you don't have that, then I think we're in trouble. So Ghanaians, I think as much as it's very difficult, I think Ghanaians also can help the public officer by not tempting us. For want of we just went through Easter. Jesus was tempted. But I think for Christ's sake, do not tempt the public officer. Do not give. And if you find that they're dragging their feet, very often they're levels. And there's always somebody. I find that most organizations, you may have some bad nuts. There are some notorious people who will do this and will not listen to what anybody has to say. But I think there are many of the public officers also who really feel and are afraid of doing the wrong thing. They're trying to do the best that they can. And that's why, for me, the education on what is ethical, what is not ethical, is paramount. Every organization has to have a program where at least 2-3 times a year, whether it's at derbers, whether it's at workshops, whatever avenue you can find, that we keep reminding ourselves as to what is the right thing to do and what we shouldn't do and what we should try and stay away from. But I think the public, if the public also do not give us, and indeed because we are not getting, we are not doing the work, then you can come to some of us and probably let us know, and we'll know how to deal with it. And the people who are actually causing us all to have black eyes will be disciplined, or at least we'll deal with them in accordance with the rules. We've got plenty of rules that we can actually use to take care of some of these things.
You are not only chairperson, Public Service Commission, you're also a lady of faith. You mentioned Easter. When it comes to this area of public service, the kind of public service that Ghanaians will want to see, the issues you've raised earlier on, what will be your admonition to church or religious people, Christians, Muslims, others? Where are we when it comes to ethics and public service?
I think I indicated earlier that this is a fight that probably ought to be not just on any one individual group, but it should be a collective fight. Because ethics very quickly determines the culture that we have and whether it's a culture that we can be proud of. And all these bodies that you talked about, the churches can play a role. Some do, but I think there are too many of us who are interested in other things. Because after all, we're trying to mold people into Christ-like individuals. And if we look at the life of Christ and what he stood for, and we go to what the book tells us about the quality, the life of a Christian and what is expected, it's no different from what we expect in the public services. So indeed, if the churches were drumming this into us, if the mosques were dealing with it on a regular basis, if the schools were also harping at all the different levels. I did a lot of my training overseas. And indeed, ethics, if you failed your ethics course, you probably would not graduate. It was that important because I could be as bright as they come. But if I'm unethical in the field of employment, I'm of no good to any company. And so for them, the ethics of the individual and the individual conduct and what the individual stands for and believes in often is very, very important. And so just like here you have to do English 101, ethics was also one of the courses that everybody, and I think if we did that from the grade school up, and particularly as people are getting ready to come into the workforce, we could probably talk about some of these things. But as I indicated earlier on, it shouldn't just be just mere theory. Because here we are talking about the practical aspect of living ethics in your day-to-day life. And that may not be quite the same as what the bright person. They will be able to give you all the theory of ethics and all of that, but they may not live it. And I think for us...
What's your thought about lifestyle audit in Ghana?
We already have a form of it here, with the public officers. The access declaration form is supposed to be, but it's not working. The lifestyle audit, if it's done right, and I know there are societies where they really take this seriously. My income is 100 Ghana. If you look at the way I live, it's 1,000 Ghana. Somebody ought to be asking the question, from whence cometh the difference? Somebody ought to be interested. And it's one of the things, in fact, when I left Ghana and came back, people will look at me and say, now the Okoye wants a son. As me si bakoye or buy a wabesi dayama nema me now the Okoye, and I'm like, me, I can't even make ends meet. How can I come and build a house for who? And I think our families and the pressures we put on ourselves also. So our lifestyle, you have a son who is not working but comes home with a brand new car. Are you asking any questions? What is he doing to actually come up with that? So in the same vein, I think in the public sector, we ought to be looking at how people, I've got a junior officer whose salary-based level I know. And when I've asked that question, I'm told that in Ghana, nobody does one job. Then there's something else which is going on, which probably isn't proper. Because if you're doing 2-3 jobs, it means you're probably moonlighting, which is against the code. Is anybody monitoring? Is anybody watching to see that indeed, if government is paying you to be here 40 hours a week, you're actually giving government 40 hours a week, or you're giving 18 and a half? And nobody's saying anything. So these are some of the things that we ought to be looking at and doing as senior managers in the public sector. When people are living beyond their means, we don't have the audit here, but I think if, as a policy, this is one policy I would probably say we can take. And maybe it might help curb some of the excesses that we see with people trying to live beyond their means.
Auntie Jane, we will need you to sustain this conversation. But your last word to my viewers today, but we will need you just to continue this conversation on public service, what we need to do to improve it. By your last word.
I think I'm grateful for the opportunity, both to you and to GBC. And I hope that public officers who were able to tune in will understand that we are here to serve. Period. It's a service. And whatever we do, we need to be able to serve our organizations properly. We need to be able to give everything that we have. And if we don't want to do that, then really we came through some door. We should be able to say we probably have had enough of this and we go away. And so as much as possible, we need to remember that we are servants. Public service The Constitution says Public Services of Ghana, and that's Article 190. If you want to know a bit more about who we are and what we are supposed to be standing for, it's very, very clear in my mind that our function is to serve, and to serve all the people of Ghana, not only the people that we know and the people that we are comfortable with, not only our tribesmen, not only people we went to school with, but all the people of Ghana. And I think if we can do that, as a Public Services of Ghana, we can stand up and actually be very, very proud of who we are and what we're trying to do. Thank you very much.
Viewers, this is what is next. And I have been in conversation with Dr. Ampadu Fofie, the chairperson of Ghana Public Services Commission. We have been reflecting on ethics in public service. This is a conversation we will want to sustain. And so we will want to leave it here just for today, but we will come your way same time next week. Today's show also will be repeated coming Monday between the hours of 1 o'clock and 2. And watch this program and invite a friend also to watch. My name is Kwabena Opuni-Frimpong. Till we meet again, may God bless our homeland Ghana and make this dear nation of us great and strong.